She was hatched in a wooden cradle beside a baby princess, and she grew up loving her. She bore a queen across the 7 kingdoms for 60 years of peace. She looked once at the land beyond the wall and 3 times refused to cross it. And when every friend she had ever known lay dead beneath her wings, she chose a lonely lake in the Reach and slipped quietly out of the histories of men. Welcome to Westeros Within, where we journey into forgotten ages, hidden legends, and ancient mysteries. This is Dragons of Westeros, Episode 7, Silverwing, the dragon who refused the wall. The old chronicles say she hatched on Dragonstone in the year 36 after the conquest, from a silver egg placed in a wooden cradle by a doting elder sister. Princess Rhaena Targaryen had a soft heart for her baby siblings. To her little sister Alysanne, she gave 1 egg. To her little brother Jaehaerys, she gave another. 2 cradles, 2 eggs, 2 hatchlings, born into the same household in the same season, for the same future. They called the silver one Silverwing. They called the bronze one Vermithor. For 60 years, they would almost never fly apart. Her scales, the chronicles tell, were the pale silver of a moonlit cloud, and her wing membranes the colour of frost on water. But the thing that set her apart was not her colour, it was her temperament. Silverwing was, from her earliest days, the gentlest dragon in the annals of House Targaryen. She was a dragon raised in the lap of a little girl who would one day become the most beloved queen the 7 kingdoms had ever known. By her 6th year, she already had a place on a royal pyre. When King Aenys I died, broken by the shadow of his cruel brother Maegor, it was Silverwing and Vermithor and Quicksilver whose flame lit his body on Dragonstone. 6 years old and already stitched into the grief of House Targaryen. And when Maegor at last died upon the Iron Throne in a way no living soul could fully explain, 3 dragons took to the sky over King's Landing to announce the new king. Jaehaerys on Vermithor, Rhaena on Dreamfire, and Alysanne on Silverwing, 14 years old, a princess being carried to her brother's crowning by the dragon of her childhood. A year later, when regents tried to part the young king and queen with politics, Jaehaerys and Alysanne answered the only way Targaryens know how. They climbed onto Vermithor and Silverwing, flew to Dragonstone, and married themselves there in secret. They chose each other on Dragonback, and Silverwing carried Alysanne to her own wedding. And then began the long peace. For the better part of 5 decades, the good queen rode her silver dragon across every kingdom of the realm. Duskendale, Oldtown, Lannisport, Barrowton, Sunspear. Wherever Jaehaerys the Conciliator took his court, Alysanne followed on Silverwing, and wherever she landed, she held her famous women's courts. The dragon would fold her wings in a meadow outside the walls, and her queen would walk in alone and listen. She listened to mothers, to widows, to daughters given in marriage at 12. It was because of those conversations that Alysanne begged her husband to abolish the right of first night, and begged him until he did. And all of it was carried on the back of a dragon who had never once been used as a weapon. Silverwing never burned a castle. She never killed an enemy. She was a dragon who was loved and who loved in return. But in the year 58 after the conquest, in the long summer of her life, she was taken somewhere she had never been. The royal progress to the north had reached Winterfell, and there Lord Alaric Stark would not allow Silverwing inside his walls. He remembered Harrenhal. He remembered what fire does to stone. Alysanne left her dragon in a meadow beyond the castle and walked in on foot, and over days of patient conversation she charmed the cold lord until he walked out himself to lay his bare hand upon her mount's silver scales. Then, restless and waiting for Jaehaerys, the queen decided to fly north, to see the wall. She stopped at Last Hearth. She stopped at the tower the small folk would soon rename Queen's Crown in her honour. She came to Castle Black. She rode Silverwing down to the Nightfort, saw how grim and haunted the old castle had become, and vowed the Black brothers deserved better. Out of her own jewels, she would later pay for Deep Lake to replace it. And then she lifted Silverwing into the sky above Castle Black and turned her nose north. The chronicles preserve what happened next in Alysanne's own hand, in a letter she wrote that same evening to her husband, the king. It is one of the only letters of Queen Alysanne that Fire and Blood remembers in first person, and it says, "Thrice I flew Silverwing high above Castle Black, and thrice I tried to take her north beyond the wall. Yet every time she veered back south and would not go onward. Never before has she refused to take me where I wished to go. 3 attempts, 3 refusals." It was summer, and the top of the ice was weeping water in the sun. But every gust of cold wind from the haunted forest made Silverwing hiss and snap in a way her rider had never seen. The gentlest dragon in the realm, the dragon who bowed her neck for children, was afraid. She was afraid of something on the other side of the ice, and she would not name it, and her queen would not force her. Alysanne turned her silver mount south. She landed, she wrote her letter. And for 100 years after, maesters and small folk and kings have asked the same quiet question. What did Silverwing sense up there in the cold that even a Targaryen queen could not? The old histories do not answer, they let the reader shudder. The years piled on her like snow. The old tales say that the last time Alysanne climbed down from Silverwing's back, her body was in such pain she wept against the silver scales, knowing she would never climb onto them again. She held on for another decade as a queen without a sky. And in the year 100 after the conquest, broken by the death of her youngest daughter, she returned to Dragonstone and died there of a wasting illness. She had ridden Silverwing nearly her whole life. Silverwing did not follow her queen into death. She crept into one of the smoking caverns of the Dragonmont and lay there alone for 29 years while the old king died and a new king rose. And new children were born to the House of the Dragon, and none of them ever called her name. And then the House of the Dragon tore itself in half. When the Dance of the Dragons came, Princess Rhaenyra's son summoned the dragon seeds of Dragonstone and bid them try to claim the riderless beasts. Many died in that terrible sowing. Vermithor killed dozens. The cannibal ate those who came near. But Silverwing, the gentle one, killed nobody. Of all 4 dragons who accepted riders that day, she was the only one the chronicles do not record, burning a man for wanting to sit on her back. A drunken, white-haired man-at-arms called Ulf the White reached her first, and she lowered her neck for him the way she had once lowered it for a queen. He did not deserve her. He flew her at the Battle of the Gullet. He flew her to the walls of Tumbleton. And there, at the first battle of that town, he and his fellow dragon seed Hugh Hammer turned their cloaks and loosed silver and bronze fire on the very people they had been sent to save. Thousands burned, thousands more drowned fleeing across the Mander. Ulf and Hugh became known forever in the chronicles as the 2 betrayers. Silverwing, the dragon of the Good Queen, had become a weapon in the hand of a drunkard. The second battle was worse. When Sir Adam Velaryon came down on the Hightower camp at dawn on sea smoke, the slaughter exploded into a sky already full of dragons. Vermithor rose under Hugh Hammer. Tessarion rose under Prince Darren, and Silverwing, disturbed by the noise, rose as well. But her rider was not on her back. Ulf the White was passed out drunk in an inn called the Bawdy Badger, sleeping through the battle in a pool of arbor gold. Silverwing took to the sky alone. A crossbow bolt was loosed at her and she climbed higher. She did not fight. She did not choose a side. She circled the battlefield for hours, while beneath her, the dragons of her age tore each other to pieces. Vermithor and Sea Smoke fell together in locked claws. Tessarion broke upon the ground, and still Silverwing circled. It was only at twilight, long after the last dragon had fallen, that she came gently to earth among the bodies. The old tales say she moved from one dead dragon to another, And when she reached the bronze body of Vermithor, her lifelong wingmate, she tried 3 times to lift his wing with her long silver nose. Maester Gildane wrote that the story is likely a fable. He preserved it anyway. The next morning, a Green Knight named Hobart Hightower brought 2 casks of wine to Ulf's tent. One was poisoned Arbor Gold. Ulf drank 3 cups. Both men died within the hour. The drunk who had worn Silverwing like a stolen crown never woke up. And Silverwing was alone again. No other rider could master her. She was too old, too large, too grieved. She lifted from the ashes of Tumbleton and flew west across the Reach and came down at last at a place called Red Lake in the stony country of House Crane. There, on a small island in the middle of the water, she made her final nest. She fed on sheep and cattle. She did not attack travelers. She did not burn villages. She simply lived. When the war ended, the chronicles counted only 4 dragons still alive in all the world. Silverwing was the oldest and the largest of them. She was the last great dragon of the Good Queen's generation. The young king who sat the Iron Throne after the dance was Aegon III, called in after years the Dragonbane, a boy who had watched his own mother devoured by a dragon and who hated the very sight of them. When his hand, Lord Torren Manderly, planned a royal progress for him through the realm, Manderly drew the route deliberately around Red Lake, so the king would never have to lay his eyes upon the last silver friend of good Queen Alysanne. And there, in the quiet that followed, Silverwing faded out of the chronicles the way an aging animal fades out of a forest. No year is written for her death, no cause is given. Somewhere in the long reign of Aegon III, the histories simply lose her. One day there is a silver shape on a stony island. The next, the maesters have nothing more to say. Her skull was never hung in the Red Keep. No song sings of any grave. She was, perhaps, the longest-lived dragon of her line. She was certainly the most loved. So tell me this, what do you think Silverwing sensed beyond the wall that day in the summer of 58? What was in the cold wind that frightened the gentlest dragon the world had ever known? Write it in the comments. And if you want more stories from the Dragons of Westeros, the ones who were loved and the ones who were feared, subscribe to Westeros Within and join me for the next chapter. Because next time, we follow a dragon the colour of blood and cracked wounds. Long as a serpent, thin as a whip, the screaming crimson mount of a prince who could never be satisfied. They called him the Blood Worm. They called his rider many things, and most of them were curses. And one red dusk above the God's Eye, that rider rose from the back of his own dragon in the middle of the sky, leapt through the air onto the back of his nephews, and drove Dark Sister through the boy's blind eye. His name was Caraxes, and the lake beneath him swallowed 2 kings that day.